board members present are Mr. Calvin Taylor, Port Royal, Mr. Jeff Black, Western Caroline, Mr. Reggie Underwood, Reedy Church, Mr. Jeff Seeley from Bowling Green, and I'm Floyd Thomas, representing the Mattapanai District. This time, I'm going to ask Reverend Upshaw if he will come before us and deliver an invocation, please. If you'll all stand.
Our Father and God, we gather in your presence to thank you for being God as we tend to the business of your people. And Father, we pray for your grace and for your mercy and for your guidance and for your direction, that all that we say and do might be pleasing in your sight. Thank you, Father, for those who give of themselves in leadership positions in our community. We pray, Father, that you would grant them wisdom, strength, courage, and Father, that they would stay close to yourself in all that they do. Now, Father, be pleased by this time that we share together as we commit it into your hands for Christ's sake. Amen.
Amen. Now, if you join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All righty, Mr. Cully, do we have any amendments to the agenda today?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman, no amendments to the agenda.
Okay, no amendments. The agenda will stand as is. Opening board comments would be first. Mr. Taylor?
I have none at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Black?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just have one. About a month ago, I guess a month and a half ago, we had printed the names of people who were delinquent on their personal property taxes in both the Freelance Star and the Caroline Progress. I would like to ask Mr. Cully where we are, the status of if that did anything for us financially. If you could get us that information, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Underwood?
Just two comments, Mr. Chairman. My first comment is hoping that all the citizens of Caroline County and across the Commonwealth continue to be mindful of Ferguson, Missouri as they go through their trials and tribulations, and that we continue to be mindful of working together to bring harmony to our communities across Caroline County. My second comment, Mr. Chairman, is I know that my colleague, Mr. Seeley, wrote a letter regarding the vote on the sand and gravel by Cheney Enterprise. And I can assure you that the petition that was sent had absolutely no bearing for me whatsoever. What I tried to look at was what was the merit that it would bring to Caroline County and let it stand on its own merit. Certainly, anytime that there is involvement, there can be shady doings by persons, but we have no control. Our obligation is to look at it from a business standpoint as well as what impact does it have or will have on Caroline County and what benefits will it have on Caroline County. The fact that some people were not honest in their endeavor absolutely had no impact, and particularly a petition. I didn't vote for a petition. I voted on the merits of the special exception. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Underwood. Mr. Seeley?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Seeley. Mine is more of a question, and Chief Loftus is here. Do we have defibrillators in this building?
Yes, sir, I believe we do. AEDs, I believe we do.
We do? And we have one in all county buildings?
No.
Okay. Can we look at what the cost would be? I think we did a repurchase just recently for the rescue squads and the fire stations. And I just wanted to make sure we had that.
We did a grant request for the automatic defibrillators monitors that are on an ambulance. They do significantly more than an AED that we have posted out here.
Okay. And the AED is, you're saying, closer to the library?
Yeah, what we have on the wall, it's for public access for people to use. The ones that we grant access are for trained providers in can pace the heart, can do a few other things. So
Okay.
an AED is about $1,300 per unit.
All right. You have one in your building? I wanted to make sure there was one in all the buildings, and I guess if you could ask the schools to make sure, we just wanted to make sure they were.
Schools have gone out and purchased some of theirs, and we got some on a grant for them as well, but we'd have to do a survey of all the public buildings, what has and what doesn't, which ones we're supporting and which ones we're not.
Yeah, if you could just double check that.
Okay.
I think I was here for an event last week, and somebody mentioned that, so I wanted to make sure we had follow-up. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
So you can check that. I'll just check with you. Okay, that takes care of opening board comments. Our first agenda item is presentations, reports, continued discussion of Abundant Life Academy security concerns. Sheriff Lippa is here. You were here at our last meeting. You and Major Mosier, or Major Mosier was here, and we wanted to make sure that you were here. You've got one of your investigators here, and I believe Mr. Manns and the owner of ALA are here also. So, Sheriff, if you would like to start, I think we've gotten quite a few concerns from the community, and that's really why we're having this discussion, to make sure we can keep our community safe, which is the main reason.
I know that Major Mosier, I think, addressed all y'all with the costs that were also involved from ALA from recent runaways that we've had. But beside the runaways that have occurred at this facility, we've had several calls that we had to respond to that involved investigations. I did bring with me Lieutenant Nutter and also Sergeant Ellett. Sergeant Ellett will be addressing those specific questions that you have in regards to the investigations, as much as that we can release. I think it's best that he addresses it because he's got firsthand knowledge of all of the incidents.
Okay. Before we go to the sergeant, the security plans that you looked at last, what's the status of those?
You'd have to ask Mr. Branning. I know when I first looked at something that they were bringing in as part of the arrangements to have ALA here, I believe Mr. Curry Roberts and Chris Alberta were involved in that at the very beginning. When I looked at it, I think they had 3 proposals. I told them that you are independent, that's your choice, what you need to do and what you need to figure out. But you definitely need a security plan, and the one that they showed me that they wanted to go to, there were cameras that were going to be installed, and I said, look, I'll do you a favor. I can show you here that you have an outbuilding that has no cameras whatsoever. And again, Paul and I were talking, and he agreed with me. That was something that needed to be done. And I told him, that's as far as I'm going to go. You go ahead and get your security plan. Once you have one in, bring it to me. I have not seen it of what they're doing and how they're going about doing it. There were some talks in between. So I cannot tell you any further than that.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sheriff. Maybe we should start with Mr. Branning then instead.
Okay.
Mr. Branning, would you like to? And how are you this evening, sir?
Very good. And yourself?
I'm well. I'm well. We just wanted to talk about the security measures you've got. I know there have been a couple of escapes, one in particular where the students got to King George. And I think the sheriff was the one who had to let you guys know that they'd escaped. So tell us what you're doing as far as security.
As far as security, one of the deficiencies that we had was we were doing construction up on the second floor over top of the boys' wing. And the windows were disabled at that time during the construction. So that's how that deficiency happened. Some boys in the middle of the night got upstairs and got into that part of the building and went out through a window. Since then, we brought back in the security company, went through all the windows and doors and so on and so forth, did another training session with our night staff on what they're supposed to be doing and what they weren't doing at the time. So part of our security at night That shift comes on at 9:30. There's 2 people in each building. There's 2 people in the boys' dorm, and there's 2 people in the girls' dorm at, from 9:30 at night until 8 o'clock in the morning. That's when all the other shifts start coming in. So what was happening is our policy is a bed in every head. And what that means is you taking a flashlight, walking into the room, whether it be the girls' dorm or the boys' dorm, shining a light and making sure that it's not a pillow, excuse me, in the bed. So that wasn't happening at that time. Since then, it is.
Okay. And that event, you're referring to the event where the 4 boys stole a 4-wheel drive and drove it to King George, basically.
Yes, sir.
That was in the early part of the summer.
Yes.
And you fixed that problem.
Yes, sir.
Can you explain why there was a young lady that escaped recently and why 2 weeks ago there were 2 boys escaped?
What happened on both those occasions, they were with life coaches. There can only be outside when they leave the dorm or, any of the buildings, whether it be the gym or a classroom or whatever. They have to have so many life coaches to so many students. Unfortunately, our dilemma has been where we have a deficiency in the people that we can hire. I guess they don't have the same vision that I do. I take my job very seriously. When one of the students leave, that's a very serious thing for me. So, in saying that, all the children now are gone from the facility because I cannot protect them out there. So, they have either gone to other facilities throughout the country or they went back to their families right now.
So you're saying as of right now there are no students at the facility?
No, sir.
Do you have intentions of bringing students back to the facility, or?
When I can guarantee this board and the families that I can keep their children safe, then I could possibly think about that again. But right now I can't.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Mr. Bannon? Mr. Underwood?
Sure, I have several questions. And Mr. Brandon, I see your passion for children. And, my concern, again, is that, and I hear you said there are no children there, which gives me some relief, because I am concerned about the safety. We looked at this project before, and there was abuse upon children. And early on, it happened again. And we have the children, as you've talked about, escape from the facility or from the project. And I've heard from churches across my district saying, why would we be so forceful in making sure that things were done? And I agree. I work with children also every day, and I understand how precious they are, but how difficult they can be at times, particularly our children who have social and emotional needs that sometimes go beyond what we can do in school. So I understand your dilemma, but for me it's always been about the security of the facility. The sheriff came in and he endorsed the plan. So I'm certainly sympathizing with you, but at the same time, I'm going to give you a thumbs down looking until we can make sure that our students are taken care of, regardless of where they come from across this nation. They're still children.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes. Well, in light of the fact that you say there are no children there at this point, I guess one question I would have is, and that might be for the county administrator, how does that impact Caroline County as far as this business of the school being here and what impact it had on the county? If there are no students there, it's almost like the school is discontinued, at least temporarily. So I guess either Mr. Brandon or Mr. Colley, how does that impact Caroline County as far as the special exception that was issued that allowed you to come in the first place?
Well, there's still a lot more to do just because the students aren't there. There's transcripts, there's just a lot of, and being, working with children and all, there's a lot of paperwork that goes with all of these things. We have therapeutic reports that have to be all put together and, in these files and jackets that have to go either to facilities where the children are now in other parts of the country, or they have to go back to the families so they can get, the children the help that they need in their hometowns, whether it be with therapy or counseling or, whatever that looks like.
Okay. And I guess the only other thing is we will review in a year, is that right?
It's actually longer, but we have the opportunity at the board's discretion to do it before then. So.
Okay. And I would just say that this is a very sensitive issue, and I'm sure that the board is looking very closely at the impact it's had, and certainly that will play into the decision being made at the time of that review. So hopefully we can correct those issues and certainly be a positive force in the community when that time comes.
Yes, sir.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Mr. Black, did you have anything?
No comments.
Mr. Seeley?
Mr. Brandon, I guess it boils down to, can you give us some idea what your long-range plan is then?
I don't want to get into a lot, and I'd be more than happy to talk to anybody, at any time. So I don't want to take up a lot of the board's time, with my issues. Sometimes we look at people, and I'm sure, the board has, hired people or interviewed people at different times, and, we always tried to hire the best we could. Sometimes it just, unfortunately, doesn't work out the way we wish it would. So one of the dilemmas we've had, excuse me, is this part of the world, meaning the East Coast, there's not a lot of facilities. There's not a lot of help out there for families. And in saying that, there's not a lot of people that understand what we do and how we do it. So that's been our real challenge. I can put alarms on windows and locks on doors, but the other part, I don't have a lot of control over.
So are we in a reevaluation process of where you think you want to go or how you're going to accomplish? I guess I'm just trying to get a feel for what the next step may be or when that might happen.
Well, right now, I just had to make sure that kids were safe, they're where they need to be, and that we can finish the rest of that process. With getting the information to different doctors or therapists or the families. So,
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Brennan, let me ask you a couple of questions on the business side.
Mm-hmm.
We all understand that. And trust me, I would like your program to be successful because that means you turn kids around, and that's a great thing. But on the business side of things, you haven't submitted a county business license yet.
what had happened was I couldn't get the proper clearances for a license in Utah. So I had to reapply for another corporation here in Virginia, which we did. In saying all of that, we had, paid the money that was due to the county, but we were still deficient with that other part of what they needed for their paperwork, which was a corporation. Excuse me. Since that time, we have gotten that paperwork, and I hope that my people are in contact with the correct department here to get that finalized and get that done.
Okay. Mrs. Carter, the Commissioner of Revenue, is off to your right, my left, in the back. And I just talked to her, and she said you don't have a county business license, which is really just paperwork. You fill out the paperwork, pay a fee, and then based on your revenue, you pay more or less.
Right.
You haven't done that. And she also said you're not a valid corporation with the state. And I guess that's what you're talking about now.
Right.
You've just completed that paperwork.
Yes, sir.
But we don't have that yet, which
You will have it before Friday this week. But the business license, the part of the business license that I couldn't comply with was the corporate part. In other words, I didn't have that corporation in Virginia.
right.
I could have gotten a, I forget what the name of it is, from another state. But there again, I couldn't at that time get clearance for that. So I just set up another corporation in Virginia. So I do have all of that information.
But you've been open for over a year.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's
See-
not a good thing, though.
No, sir. There again, as far as the fee and as far as that license, that wasn't the problem. The problem was the corporation
Okay.
in trying to get that clearance.
But I would think that being open a year, and I know the county's process is to fill out the paperwork. The minimum is $25 or $35, something
Yeah.
like that.
Yes, sir.
And then you pay more. I would think logically that was something you should have been able to do within the first month of your opening.
And that's what I tried to do, but they won't accept that if you don't have that corporate part, and we didn't have that.
I was
Right.
just
Right.
I was just going to say, Mrs. Carter's the Commissioner of Revenue.
Right.
She will accept money at any
Right.
time.
No, we paid
Okay.
that money.
Well, but you have to actually fill out the application. So
Yeah.
that's not a good thing if I'm looking at you saying you've been open for a year, we've had these issues with security and safety, and you never even did a county business license. You're not making it easy for us to help you.
Yes, sir.
That's the thing. So, all right. Sheriff, thank you, Mr. Branning. I think that's it. Sheriff, if you could have, I was looking on my phone for the text alerts that the county sends out,
Yes.
and I think it was 2 months ago that we got the county alert that said there was an escape, 2 male juveniles with mental issues. And that's exactly what the alert said.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I'm sure I wasn't the only one who got phone calls from the area residents with the helicopters flying over. There was an aerial search and all sorts of things in the middle of the night. They said it was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So give us a little bit more.
Well, that was given to our dispatchers, and that's why that went out. Of course, we probably could have phrased it a little bit differently, but they did have, at least from what was given to our E911, to let everyone be aware that they do have some type of mental problems.
Okay.
At least that's what was passed on. And that's why the alert went the way that it went.
Okay. A little bit more about that, because you basically called in the state police. They have a state police helicopter. They were the ones who did the search, and
Well, they did, along with King George, brought us over a couple of dogs. We had several people out in this situation to look for them. And I think everyone in here is in agreement. We all want to help kids. We all want to make sure everyone is safe. And whenever we are missing people from ALA, you just can't stop a search. You've got to continue to search, and that's exactly what we did. The two incidents, other than the King George, I think involved like 72 hours total of manpower hours just from us. But I don't know what else I can tell you that would be any different than what you already know. I know Mr. Branning wants to do right. He can't help it if they didn't follow their procedures. I know when we had talked, he told me that the suggestions that I gave him, and he assured us that all was going to be good.
okay. And we have, I know you and I talked, and I believe I talked to,
Probably Sergeant Elliott.
no, I was trying to think of which director at ALA. You're on the 4th director now, right? Okay. In a year, you've had 4 directors. 2 are under, well, one was convicted of child abuse, the other's under indictment. I don't know what happened to the third, but I think it was the one that's under indictment now that I talked to about refunding the county's cost when the county has to look for your kids. 72 hours or whatever we're looking for total time is 72 hours that he's not on the road doing other things. And we've gone through the conditions, and somehow that condition didn't get finalized when we finally approved your proposal. So I think that's something we need to look at a little bit more if you decide to continue with kids for the program. All right, Sheriff, anything else you want to add for us?
Just one thing, because if we do have children that do come to ALA, and I know Paul and I were under this agreement, and I just want to make sure that that does get put into the conditions, is that if any child is missing and they know that they're missing, call us immediately. We need to know that because of how far we have to travel, where it is, there's not that much cell coverage, and like I said just a few minutes ago, if you're missing a child, you just can't stop the search. The sooner we're aware of it, the better off we are. If they locate the child and they're able to, again, cancel us, that's okay. But I just want to make sure that we're notified immediately. They can always cancel us. I think that was part of it that was supposed to be a condition, and I think they had at least, if I'm not mistaken, at least 3 times. Right. If that happened on 3 occasions, it would be after the 3rd one that then they would have to pay us for that.
Oh, after the 3rd one?
Yeah, I think it was, wasn't it, Paul? Yeah.
But we don't have that as an actual condition or requirement. You have a gentleman's agreement.
Well, I guess we thought it was part of it, yes.
And so did we.
Yes.
Yeah, but apparently that didn't get in the...
No, because in all fairness to ALA, we felt like 3 times would be fair. It's no different than any other alarm that might go off to a building, as far as us always responding.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Now, the one where the 4 boys escaped and went to King George, they never informed you. You actually had to inform them that they'd escaped.
That is correct. They took that gator up to Horns where it ran out of gas. They were walking on 301. That's where King George picked them up. It was about 5:15 in the morning, and we brought them down to ALA. They were unaware at that point that they were missing.
Okay. Mr. Branning, may I ask you a question? You can come back again, or you want to just stand back there. You can just say yes or no. We have several options that we could go through. I'm sure you would agree that there's enough evidence or enough issues that we could say we could look at your special exception as to whether we're going to revoke it or not. But if we don't go that far, would you be willing to include, I guess, refunding the Sheriff's Department for their time and effort in the conditions that we have? So you're nodding yes. Okay, you're nodding yes. After 3, just like the sheriff said. So we would have to actually hold another public hearing to amend your conditions. And we would be able to, you would be willing to do that? Okay. Because, again, our job is to make sure the community is safe. Since you're in our community, our job also has to make sure that everything there is safe. So I think we're trying to work on the same thing. You don't have any children there now. You may have some in the future. You've got a permit to do that. You've also got to fill out all your business paperwork. Before we allow you to have more kids there, you're going to have to do that. So we would like to have another public hearing in January to add that condition and possibly anything else. But I don't know. Yes, got to go to the Planning Commission first. All right. So we'll have to send it through the whole. All right. All right. Okay. I'm getting advice from my lawyer that says to revoke your special exception, the Board of Supervisors would do it. To amend the conditions, it has to go to the Planning Commission first, which may take a little longer. So would you be willing to go to the Planning Commission to have that condition added that Sheriff Lippa's mentioning as far as reimbursing the county for their law enforcement costs? Okay. All right, you gave me advice. Now, do I just send it to the Planning Commission, or we recommend it?
No.
By motion? Well, I know we got to do a motion. Mike, you...
Wait a minute, Mr. Chairman. Before we talk about a motion, I think we have to have a discussion if we, as the board, even want this to go back to the Planning Commission.
Okay, you're right. You're right. I just want to do that one process first, but you are right. You are right. You can begin the discussion.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, based on what I've heard, and they can say what they want. I've been called everything anyway about this situation before. I'm just not sure this is what I want in Caroline County. I think enough is enough. It came from somewhere in Texas to Utah with the same issues about child abuse and child neglect, and now it's another situation. There was a security plan that the sheriff was discussed with the sheriff, and he stood here and it was endorsed saying that it was going to be taken care of. None of this has been done, and yet to operate a business in the county with no license, not take care of due diligence, I think it's unacceptable. And I don't think it should be here.
Any other discussion on that point? Mr. Seeley?
Mr. Chairman, I think there were a couple of conditions that we talked about, and I'd like to have the DVD pulled up because the sheriff and I have talked. We talked about a number of things that evening when we actually approved it. And I think a number of those conditions need to be revised. And that's why I was looking for the long-term plan for Abundant Life Academy. I'm not opposed to sending this back to planning. Let's look at the conditions that were missed and bring it back.
Mr. Black?
Mr. Chairman, I think that Mr. Brandon came to us today in full faith, and I believe that we have to give him an opportunity to let this go back to the Planning Commission as well, fix the problems. Thank you.
Mr. Taylor?
I have no problem with it going back to the Planning Commission, but I think there are more issues here than just the reimbursing. I think there are other issues, and that's the concern that I have about it going back to the Planning Commission is if it goes back to the Planning Commission and we take care of that issue as far as the security and reimbursing, there are other issues that are involved. I would rather see us look at reviewing the application and talking about that and making a decision as to the direction that we want to go at that time.
The special exception.
The special exception. I mean, I just think that going before the Planning Commission for that one issue, if you get that, that doesn't take care of the majority of what the concerns are.
Okay. All right. We have several choices. We can look at their special exception. which would be the board doing it. We can send it back to the planning commission, or there is their old do nothing right now. So how does the board wish to act? A motion in either case would be in order, and a motion would be, or is there a motion to consider revoking their special exception? Is that what you were saying, Mr. Underwood?
Yes, I will, Mr. Chairman.
So you
Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman.
You would be making a motion that says in the interest of protecting health and safety and welfare in general public, particularly those living in the proximity of Abundant Life Academy, that you would want to hold a public hearing to reconsider Special Exception 01-2013? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
So that's your motion?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second to that motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make an amendment to that motion if I could.
If Mr. Underwood will accept it.
Go ahead, Mr. Silver.
I would like to, that is the ultimate of what the Board of Supervisors can do. And I think that we do need to going back to the Planning Commission, allowing the Planning Commission to look at the conditions, and then they'll have to hold a public hearing at the Planning Commission. We'd hold a public hearing here on the addition of conditions. We'd give the public the opportunity to come speak about it, and it would give us an opportunity to look at a broader process rather than just revocation right now. So I'd like to amend that it go to the Planning Commission for review of the conditions and bring it back to the Planning Commission and to the Board of Supervisors for public hearing.
No, Mr. Chairman, no. That's not my motion.
Mr. Underwood's not accepting your
No.
friendly amendment.
The reality of it is, if I could make comment, Mr. Chairman, the reality of it is, if this facility wants to reopen, they have the right to come back and to apply again. There's nothing that says they can't reapply, other than time. They need time anyway to meet certain standards.
Well,
I'm just saying what is reasonable here, based on what we have before us, based on what's happened in the past. If it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it is a duck. This is not the first time that these issues have come up with this organization. Go back and read the history. We talked about it before. Year after year. When is enough enough?
You make a valid point.
I do not amend my motion.
Is there a second to Mr. Underwood's motion?
I'll second his motion to get it on the floor.
All right, so the motion we would be holding, the motion before the board is we would be holding a public hearing to consider revoking the special exception. Now, I have a discussion just to make sure. Mr. Fincham, can you help me? Just to make sure. If we were to revoke this particular special exception, the applicant would have to wait how long before they reapplied? Or could they reapply like the next day?
I'd have to go back and look at the ordinance. I know there's a time limit if the board denies an application. I don't recall whether it speaks to revocation. I don't believe so.
I didn't think so either. Madam Attorney?
I don't believe it speaks to that. The statute, the code provision that speaks to the revocation of an SE does not mention how long somebody could reapply. I mean, as long as it's within, it doesn't, there's no time limit.
Okay, so in reality, and that being the case, if we, and we don't know what the public hearing would be or the results from that, it could be revoked, it could be not revoked, but if it were to be revocation, in that case, it really doesn't do anything different if there are no students in the facility now, and it wouldn't do anything because once you got the potential for students, you could reapply, and that reapplying would be based upon fixing whatever conditions we thought were issues and the sheriff's security plan, and reimbursement to the sheriff, of course, for time spent.
Yes, sir. It will be subject to conditions imposed by the board based upon that new application.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Okay, so could you just repeat what we are voting on, just for clarity?
Mr. Underwood's motion would be to hold a public hearing at our probably second meeting in January, to hold a public hearing to consider revoking the special exception permit. Now, all that is it's considering it. Doesn't mean we're going to revoke it, doesn't mean we're going to not revoke it. But what I just went through with Mr. Fincham to make sure we all understood, and especially that I understood, if the board were to decide to revoke it, they can come back at any point in time and say, we've got a new application, which would then have to go to the Planning Commission first, which is essentially what we're doing. So, all right, any other discussion? Is that clear? Any other discussion? The motion before us is to hold a public hearing at our second meeting in January to consider the revocation or revocation of Special Exception 01-2013 for Beverly Run LLC owner Veritas Adolescent Services. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Division of the House, Mr. Taylor, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Black?
Nay.
Mr. Underwood? Aye. Mr. Seeley?
Nay.
And I vote aye, so the motion carries 3-2. So we're going to hold a public hearing on January 27th, I believe, is our second meeting? Okay. Second meeting in January. All right, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Sheriff. Appointments, Mr. Akers is not here to do his Madison District Board of Assessors. Mr. Taylor, you have a Board of Assessors?
I do not at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Black, you gave us yours. Yes. Mr. Underwood? Okay.
I don't have a person at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Seeley?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay, you got one.
I do have one.
Okay.
I would like to enter the name of Mr. Keith Chapman to be the assessor for the Bowling Green District.
Is it Chapman or Chapman?
Chapman.
It's a T.
It's a T. Chapman. I don't know, I want to put a P in it.
That's a different family.
Different family.
Okay. All right, motion made by Mr. Seeley to appoint Mr. Chief Keith Chapman from the Bowling Green District for the Board of Assessors. Is there a second?
Second,
The
Mr.
chair
Chairman.
can second it for him. Mr. Underwood makes a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion carries. We still don't have one for Mattapan, so, and we don't have one for Madison. So we'll have to do those in January. I think that's the latest we can do it. It's all right. We need that one. Consent agenda. Approval of Planning Commission schedule, withdrawal of Mr. B, special exception, authorization for firefighter grant, and the senior gala resolution. Anyone would like to pull anything from there?
I make a motion, we adopt the consented, oh, go ahead, Mr. Taylor.
I would like to pull C, please.
C, firefighter grant? Okay. A, B, and D?
I make a motion, we approve A, B, and D, Mr. Chairman.
Second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Underwood. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Taylor, firefighter grant.
Right. My question, I guess, for Chief Loftus is, this grant, as I understand it, is going to, if it's successful, will replace 2 vehicles that are in service now. But Port Royal has the oldest vehicle, and that's not one of the ones that's going to be addressed with this grant. Am I right?
Mr. Taylor, we propose in the capital budget for next year to replace the Port Royal truck with a conventional cab, combination tanker engine.
Okay, so
that's going to be coming forward in the capital plan for next year.
okay, and that was just my question. I know that was an old. That's the oldest
It is,
vehicle.
and we're proposing that be funded in next year's budget.
Okay, that's fine. That's the only question I had. So I would move that we approve item C on the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, motion made by Mr. Taylor, seconded by Mr. Black to approve that one. Now, I just had a clarification. Well, carry the motion first. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. That motion carries unanimously. Mr. Cully,